So good evening, everyone. We are back to the Spirit's book. Let me share the screen here. Last week, we started the last item of chapter 7 of book 2, which is forgetfulness of the past. But it's a very important subject that is always discussed, always asked. We read a couple of questions. And we are going to start today on 394. We finished 393 last week, right, Philip?
Yes.
Yeah. So what we did study is that the first question is why we forget our past. And the Spirit tells us that if we remembered everything, all our past, we would be overwhelmed. That we wouldn't be able to deal with the challenges of the present existence. And then on the second question, Kardec asked the spirits, if we cannot remember, how can we be accountable? And the spirits tells us, as we are always evolving, our remembrance of the past, the intuition that we have and the ability to look at ourselves and recognize who we are and our imperfections, it's already enough for us to have an idea of what we were in the past. But as we are always evolving, we have to remember that this is, again, like I said last week, the best version of ourselves. So we need to understand that we don't remember our previous existences because the divine law is perfect in the sense that there is a reason for us not to remember, which is our inability to deal with our previous existences and the remembrance. One thing that we have to remember is that if we are able to remember our previous existences, we would be able to remember everyone else's also. And that would create a lot of conflicts. We sometimes have difficulty to deal with things that we did in this present existence. Imagine if we add everything from previous existences, you would make it very difficult, almost unbearable for us. So we will remember when we go back to the spiritual world, we will remember our immediate existence in its entirety, and we will have flashes of previous existences on a need-to-know basis on everything that can help us. But also we won't have full recollection when we go back to the spiritual world. Okay, so let's start now on 394. I remember that Philip read the question, and then we stopped. So let's start again, Philip. Thank you.
On worlds that are more advanced than ours, where beings are not subject to all our physical needs and infirmities, do they understand that they are happier than we are? Happiness is usually relative, and it is felt in comparison with a state that is less happy. As some of those worlds have not reached perfection, despite being better than ours, their inhabitants must have their own troubles. While wealthy people here might not endure physical poverty that tortures the poor, they are still victims to other kinds of troubles that embitter their lives. Thence, I would ask if the inhabitants of those other worlds consider themselves to be just as unhappy, according to their standard of happiness, as we consider ourselves to be according to ours. Do they complain of their fate, since they do not recall their inferior lives to serve as a standard of comparison? There are two different answers to this question. In some worlds, the inhabitants have a very clear memory of their past lives and therefore can and do appreciate the happiness that God permits them to enjoy. However, there are others where the inhabitants, despite living in better conditions than you, are still subject to great troubles and much unhappiness. They do not appreciate their lives because they have no recollection of a worse existence. Although they do not appreciate those conditions as men and women, they appreciate them as spirits. The unconsciousness of our past lives, especially when painful, is somewhat providential and reveals the divine wisdom. The recollection of our painful past lives is nothing more than the vague memory of a bad dream when they are finally permitted to re-enter their memory in superior worlds. The painfulness of present suffering in lower worlds would be greatly aggravated by the memory of all the misery we may have experienced in the past. This allows us to conclude that everything that God has made is well made, and it is not up to us to find fault with God's works or decide how God should regulate the universe. The memory of our past lives would present many serious disadvantages. In some cases, it would cause cruel humiliation, while in others it might prompt pride that would hamper our free will. God has given us just what is necessary and sufficient for us to improve ourselves. The voice of our conscience and our instinctive predispositions. God keeps anything that would be a source of injury away from us. Let us add that if we preserve the memory of our former personalities and actions, we would also remember those of other people. This knowledge would have a disastrous effect on our social relations. We do not always have a reason to be proud of our past. It is better that it is hidden. The concept is perfect harmony with the statements of spirits about the worlds that are more evolved than ours. In those worlds where moral excellence reigns, there is nothing painful in recalling the past, and the inhabitants of those happier worlds remember their past lives as we remember what we did yesterday. The visits that they may have made to lower worlds are nothing more than a vague nightmare.
Okay. So this is a long question and answer. It talks about, the question relates to more advanced worlds. And Kardec brings a point here that as happiness is something that is relative and is all normally felt in comparison to those around us that are less happy or with our own situation, previous existences, previous situation and things like that, wouldn't be fair to conclude that in more evolved worlds, there will also not be a perfect happiness, or there will also be suffering, and there will also be struggles. And he gives the example here about the wealthy people that do not have physical poverty, but they still have other issues that troubles them. So what we have to remember is that as we evolve, we are more able to deal with our past. What we learn from the spirits is that the recollection of our previous existences will come to us as we are able to deal with what we have done. So if if we go to a more evolved world, but we are still struggling with our imperfections and readjustments from our past, we are going to remember our previous existences on a limited basis. And if you think of when Kardec wrote this question, which is 160 years ago, something like that, you can think of us today. So we live in a better world than when he wrote that. And still we have unhappy, suffering individuals, spirits living. So we have no recollection of our lives at the time of Kardec. If we had, maybe we would be a little less complaining of our struggles. But the trick here, as the spirits repeat, and then Kardec say to us, is that if we start remembering our previous existences, we start remembering the previous existences of everybody else. And then we start creating issues. We start having issues with all those around us. Because remember, we are incarnated amongst those that are our loved ones and those that we have to readjust, that we have to overcome challenges, differences, to repair past mistakes. We studied last week sympathies and antipathies, and we study about this reaction we have sometimes when we meet a person that we never met before. We can have a reaction of immediate empathy and immediate rejection without clearly understanding why. And this relates to our previous existence or to the vibrations that we are both emitting, us and others. So again, it's important for us to remember, to understand that the remembrances of previous existences will come as we need them. But it's important for us to have a clean slate, for us to have a fresh start on each incarnation, so we can work, be molded when we are young by our parents to correct our imperfections as they see them. And then as we grow, us ourselves, we start to change to work on our imperfections as we become aware of the need to evolve and the need to work on our imperfections. Okay? All right. Questions, comments?
John, today I was listening something about the Bible, Jesus, the studies, and it was the study was exactly about this, about you don't remember our previous incarnation. And they said that there is in the Bible, I have to look it up because I don't remember, read something in the Bible, that Jesus said, our enemies are in our family. Something like this, you know?
Yeah, yes, we learn from Spiritism that we are reincarnated with our loved ones to help us, to assist us, and with our past enemies to overcome the differences, to overcome the challenges.
Yes,
so,
but in the Bible, I have to read again I don't remember saying something like this.
I don't remember also reading that in the Bible or seeing anything of any words of Jesus in that sense. So I cannot say anything. I don't know, Elmo, if you remember something.
Oh, not in these words, not come from Jesus. Not that I can remember.
Yes, yeah, me too. Oh, check it out. Just two.
Okay.
It was nice. Thank you.
Yeah. I remember who are my brothers and who is my mother and who are my brothers and sisters. In the sense that we are all children of God. We are all brothers and sisters, right?
Yeah.
So that saying that the physical ties are important, but are not everything, right?
Yes, that's right. In the end, we are all brothers and sisters, and all you need love.
Yeah, in the evolutionary path, we are all brothers and sisters, and we need to learn to love each other, right?
Indeed. Yeah, okay. Thank you, John.
Thanks, Maria. Anyone else? Okay.
395. Can we obtain any revelations regarding our past lives? Not always. Many persons know who they were and what they did. If they could speak freely, they would make curious revelations about the past.
Okay, so here we can talk about past life therapies, right? Which is something that a lot of people are curious to do. Some people have done, and there is always a question that is brought when we start studying about reincarnation and spiritism and why we don't remember our past. The famous Dr. Brian Weiss developed his theory on reincarnation based on research he did with patients with past life regression. According to Spiritism, what we learn from Spiritism is that past life regression, past life therapies should be used only to overcome traumas that we have that we cannot overcome with medicine, with treatments in the present existence. Sometimes the only way to deal with that is going to our previous existence where we had the cause of this trauma. So that's the only thing that Spiritism says it's not recommended, but it can be done. The problem with past life therapies, if you are doing out of curiosity, is that you may find things that you don't want to find, and you may be traumatized in different ways that in the end you can create more trauma than it can solve. Of course, everybody wants to go to the past and find that there were kings or queens or wealthy people, but again, the vast majority of us were not, right? We were peasants, we were slaves, we were the other side of the privileged, because the privileged, it's a small number. So again, we may have one or another incarnation that we had wealth, because it's important we go through different experiences, but we must be cautious to what we are going to find. The studies of Dr. Stevenson, which are very important studies on reincarnation in this country, addressed children that clearly remember their previous existences. And that was very important to disseminate reincarnation at least a little bit in the scientific community here in this country. There are some very interesting cases. There is a book by Dr. Carol Bauman, recent, about a boy that remembers his previous existence as a pilot. Why do children have this? Some children have this ability. First, why Dr. Stevenson went to Asia to get that? Because the society there is more open to this. So they don't suffocate children that have these remembrances. They are more open to it. So they are more acceptable of the studies. Here in this country, it's, children are dismissed as fantasy, as other things, and So it's more difficult to find. Cases are everywhere, but in Asia, especially in the cultures that believe in reincarnation, it's more easier to find these children. Up until 7 years, we live here and there, part here, part in the spiritual world. So our mind is more open to the spiritual world. So in being open to the spiritual world, in some cases, it's more open to previous existence, the immediate one that we had, especially if it ended in a traumatic form. That's how they remember their previous existence. So these are all important contributions to the field of reincarnation. But these children, as they grow older, they end up forgetting their previous existence. From 7 to 14 starts disappearing, and most of them completely forget. If the parents don't write or don't document it, they forget. Even this boy that was a pilot, I saw an interview with him, he doesn't really remember anymore of this existence, this previous existence, when he died as a pilot in the Second World War. So again, in natural ways, we can remember our previous existence. Some people have this ability, but it's exception, and it is not really, in most cases, it's not really helpful to us to do the past life therapies. Okay? Questions here? Comments? Nothing? Okay.
396. Some people believe that they have a vague memory of an unknown past, which presents itself as a fleeting image from a dream that one tries to recall in vain. Is this belief only an illusion? Sometimes it is real, but it is often an illusion that is merely the effect of an overactive imagination.
We have to remember that our brain, our mind is active and is very efficient in connecting the dots. And we are going to see this in the next chapter when we start studying dreams. So what happens many times is that we have some vague memory of a past, and we connect the dots with information that we have. So we create a story for ourselves that is not 100% real. That is part of it is real, part of it is, as they say here, an overactive imagination. So we have to be very careful when we discuss this, when we have people talking about this, because we cannot take it 100% as 100% real, because many times it's like when a child talks about experiences in the spiritual world, especially young children. We always say that we shouldn't dismiss, but we shouldn't give too much attention, because if we start giving too much attention, they start living this fantasy land and creating fantasies on top of what they are seeing that is real. So we should not dismiss, but we should listen to them, give the importance it's needed, but not more than that, not to excite their imagination. And here is the same thing. If we start giving too much importance to what we're being told, we run the risk of this person start to creating a bigger story than it really was. So again, some people have this vague memory, and we all heard of the term Deja Vu, which is when you You go through a situation or go to a place that you know that you haven't been before, but you feel like you have been there before, which is a very, very interesting feeling. I had only once in my life, but it's a very interesting experience that you go to a place that you've never been before, and you feel like you are coming back home. So this is part of what it's a vague memory of an unknown past. We don't really remember, but we feel that we have been there. So it is something that happens to many people. Some people have even more, especially those that have mediumship, have the ability to go a little bit further into this remembrances of the past. Okay. Any questions, comments here? Okay.
397. Is the recollection of past lives more exact when the physical life experience is of a more elevated nature than ours? Yes. The incarnate spirit remembers them more clearly because the body is less material. The remembrance of the past is always clearer in those who inhabit higher worlds.
Okay, this is something we talked a little bit. The more we evolve, the more we are able to deal with our previous existences. So as we move towards a more perfected existence as spirits, we are going to be more and more aware of our previous existences. Again, we will remember the troubles and the problems as we are able to deal with it. Let's say, let's give a simple example here. You have a sibling that you really have a difficult time. You are fighting all the time. You have a very difficult relationship. And as you move along in life, these differences you are able to overcome. You are able, circumstances in life make you become closer and closer to this sibling. And then by the end of the life, you are completely in love in the universal fraternal sense with this sibling, clearly completely overcoming any difference you had when you were younger. So in that sense, when you go back to the spiritual world, you may be able to remember the cause of the problem you had with this sibling because you were able to overcome it. So it may be useful to you to remember and to understand better the need to go through the difficulties, the need, and because it will give you also the satisfaction of being able to overcome the differences in the immediate finished existence. So as we move more and more advanced, evolve more and more, we are more able to remember our previous existences as we are more able to deal with them. Okay? We have a question here. What useful information can one get remember previous incarnations? What really matters is the now and how we deal with the now in order to do right. Yes, that's the divine law is there for a reason. The fact we don't remember previous incarnations is because it's a useful tool for us to move forward. Now, sometimes it's important to remember. Sometimes it's a helpful tool for us to move forward. Again, when we have traumas, let's say someone that is has agoraphobia, which is the fear of going out in the street, living closed in a place. Maybe going back and finding the cause of it in a previous existence will help overcome this this trauma. So, you know, in general, the divine law, the perfect law of the Creator is there for us to make the best use of our incarnations, and the best use is not remembering our previous incarnations, but sometimes it's useful here and there, okay? All right.
I think it's important to note that in more elevated worlds, where the physical body is less dense, as the last answer gives to us right there, the remembrance of past lives is just as natural. So we are talking about worlds in which even the physical body is a lot more ethereal. We are moving towards a more spiritual than physical life, so to say. And we are able to recognize those past experience as just as that, past experience, that what really matters, as the person said, is the present, is what we're doing right now. For us today, some regression may be therapeutic and should be only used in cases of therapy, because all the things that Ron already said, we cannot deal with our past. But imagine spirits who are now living worlds where the physicality, the physical body, is already a lot less dense, a lot more ethereal than the ones that we carry right now. These are obviously spirits that have matured a lot more than what right now, and are able to deal with whatever previous experience they had as just that, something that happened in the past and do not carry much value and going to move on. But for us, would be a stressor.
Thanks, Elmo. Anyone else? Okay.
398. As our instinctive predispositions are reflections of our past lives, can we determine the faults we have committed in the past by analyzing these predispositions? Of course, up to a certain point. We would also have to take into account the improvement that our spirit may have earned and the resolutions made while in an errant state in the spiritual realm. Our present life may be much better than our previous one. Could it be worse? Could some individuals commit faults in a subsequent existence that they didn't commit in the previous?
Yeah.
That depends on...
Sorry, it should be did not commit in the previous one.
Oh, okay. That depends on their advancement. If they were unable to resist temptation, they might commit new faults as consequences of the circumstances they chose. Such faults might indicate a stationary rather than a regressive state, because a spirit never regresses and can only advance or remain stationary.
Okay, so as we look at our instincts, our predispositions, we can see where we are. We can analyze, you know, if you have inclinations to do things that you know are not the best path, you may conclude that that's something that you are bringing from a previous existence where you had probably yielded to these inferior instincts. But also, as they say here, we evolve in the spiritual realm. We can progress by learning more in the spiritual realm and preparing ourselves when we come to a new reincarnation to test ourselves if we have really learned what we studied in the spiritual world. We can talk about the whole André Luiz collection and his evolutionary path in the spiritual world throughout the collection. We see André Luiz in Ossular, and towards the end, he's a much more learned spirit. But of course, a new reincarnation is where he's going to put in practice everything that he's learning, what he has learned in the spiritual world. And then when Kardec asks the spirits, can we commit faults that we did not commit in a previous existence? There are two things here. First, we are always progressing. A spirit never regresses. So we cannot go back to commit faults that we had already overcome. Is as I always joke. If you have acquired patience, if you have become patient, you are never going to lose your patience. You either have it or you don't. So the thing here is we can only know if we do not have a bad inclination if we have the temptation and we are tested, okay? So you cannot say that you are not a thief until you have been given an opportunity to steal and you decide not to, because you know that it's not right and you are going to resist. So let's say you go out when you are young with a bunch of friends and they decide to steal something. Again, doesn't need to be serious, can be very, very simple. If you refuse to do that, you know that it's not something that you morally you can do. It means that you have overcome the temptation. Maybe you never stole in a previous existence, and now, given the opportunity in this existence, you go and steal. Meaning, it's not that you had overcome the temptation in a previous existence, is that you didn't have the temptation, and now you have, and you fail. We can talk a more simple example with addictions, right? That we discussed last week. How do you know if you are not going to go back to smoke? If you go to a place where everybody's smoking and you don't feel any need to grab a cigarette, or you even feel disgusted by everybody smoking at your side, you know that you have overcome the addiction. If you are tempted to smoke, but you refuse to, means that you are on a path of overcoming. You already know that it's not the right path. You're still struggling, but you are already on the right path. And the third option, you go there and you grab a cigarette and smoke, meaning you haven't been able to overcome the addiction. You are never going to be tested if you are not placed in that situation. So if you never go to a place where people are smoking and offering cigarettes, you never know if you have overcome what stage you are on your on overcoming your addiction. This is more or less the idea here on the faults that we can commit in existence that we haven't committed in a previous one, a question of opportunity. Okay? Questions, comments here? Okay.
399. As the hardships of physical life are atonement for past faults and lessons for the future, can we infer the character of our prior existence from these variations? This is done frequently, since the nature of the atonement incurred always corresponds to the fault committed. Nevertheless, this should not be considered an absolute rule. Instinctive predispositions provide a more certain indication, as the trials suffered by a spirit are as much for the future as for the past. When a spirit has reached the end of its errant life assigned by God, it chooses the trials that it will suffer to accelerate its progress, meaning the kind of existence that it believes will most likely yield the means of advancing. The trials of this new life always correspond to the faults for which it must make amends. If the spirit succeeds in this new struggle, it rises, and if it fails, the spirit must try again. Spirits always possess free will. This free will allows them to choose the trials they elect to endure in the physical life, and as incarnates in a human body, it all allows them to deliberate whether they will do something or not, ultimately choosing between good and bad. To deny humanity's free will would be to reduce human beings to the status of mere machines. Upon returning to the physical life, a spirit temporarily forgets its past existences, as though a veil hid them. Sometimes it manages to grasp a vague perception of them, and they may be revealed under certain circumstances, but this only occurs if decided by higher spirits. They spontaneously make this revelation for some useful end, and never solely for satisfying idle curiosity. A spirit's future lives can never be revealed during the physical life, because these future lives are dependent upon the manner in which the spirit lives its present existence and the choices it makes. Temporary unawareness of the faults it has committed is no obstacle to a spirit's improvement, because the knowledge the spirit had of them when in the errant state and the desire it felt to repair them guided intuitively, inspiring that spirit to resist evil temptations. This is the voice of its conscience and is supported by the spirits who assist it if it follows their suggestions. Although incarnates do not exactly know their former actions, they always know the kind of faults they have been guilty of committing and the dominant aspects of their characters. They only need to study themselves in order to know what they have been, not by what they are now, but by their predispositions. The trials of physical life are both atonements for past faults and trials designed to make us better for the future. They purify and elevate, provided that they submit to them. The nature of the trials and tribulations that they have to endure may also enlighten us in regard to what we have been and what we have done, just as we deduce the crimes of a convict based on the penalty given to him by law. Thus, those who have sinned by pride are punished by the humiliation of an inferior standing, the self-indulgent and greedy by poverty. the hard-hearted by the cruelties they will suffer, tyrants by slavery, bad sons by the ingratitude of their own children, the idle by subjugation to hard and relentless labor, and so on.
Okay. So this is the last question of the chapter, okay? Spirits and Kardec talk a lot here about trials and atonements, or trials and expiations. It's important for us to remember the concepts of trials and expiations. First, we live in a world of trials and atonements, or trials and expiations. We are moving into a world of regeneration. A world of trials and expiations is where evil prevails over goodness. A world of regeneration is where goodness prevails over evil. Trials are challenges that we face in our existence that do not have any relation to our past. It has an opportunity for us to grow morally and intellectually. Atonements or expiations are challenges we face in our existence that are related to our past, are reparations for our past. So it's important to understand the concepts here as Kardec asks the spirits if the hardships of the physical life are atonement for past faults and lessons for the future. Can we deduct the character of our prior existence from it? And the spirits answer here that yes, frequently, because what we are facing in this present existence is either a consequence of our previous existence, or it is a challenge that we are facing as an opportunity to grow. Again, we are never going to face something that we cannot overcome. That's what the spirits teach us, that all the challenges we face in our present existence, we have the ability to overcome. Doesn't mean that we will overcome, because it depends on our free will. But they are all related to trials or atonements. So then Kardec, on his explanation, he talks about, first, when we go back to the spiritual world, we are in an errant life again, meaning life of the spirit in the spiritual world between incarnations. When we are close to a new incarnation, reincarnation, if we are participating in our reincarnatory plan, we can choose the trials and the atonements that we are going to face as an opportunity to grow and to accelerate our progress. Of course, we have the assistance of the spiritual benefactors that know better than us what we can deal with and what we cannot. So if we choose too much, they will tell us not to try too much, because the chances of failing are bigger. But remembering we have free will, and that's very important, because the free will allows us to choose the trials and atonements that we are going to face in this new physical life, if we are aware and participating in the reincarnation plan. Remember, spirits that are not aware of the process go to a new reincarnation without participating in it. But when we come here and incarnate, again, we have free will to make the choices if we are going, when we are faced with the challenges, how we are going to deal with that. Also, it's important here, they mentioned that, Kardec mentions that we have sometimes a vague perception of our previous existence. It may be reviewed under certain circumstances, but only if it helps us, as we mentioned before. One very important paragraph here that it's relevant is when Kardec tells us that our future lives are never going to be reviewed because they depend on how our present life is dealt with and the choices we make. So our future lives are not written in stone because they are decided at every moment that we are making choices according to our free will. That applies on an individual basis, and that applies on a collective basis. So if we hear, and we hear a lot nowadays, these predictions of future dates, specific dates or years in the future that this and that is going to happen, always remember that because it depends on the collective free will of humanity, it is impossible to predict the future. We can say that the world is moving, we are moving into a world of regeneration, yes. When this is going to happen, we cannot predict because it depends on the free will of the whole of 30 billion spirits, more or less, that live on this planet and around this planet, incarnated and discarnated. So it's important to remember this as we hear these predictions of specific dates in the future. So if someone tells us about our future lives, we take it with a grain of salt because we can always change. We can change the future on this life. We can change the future of a future life as we move along also. Okay. We'll find this. I was looking here, trying to find where it is. It talks specifically about this in the Medium's book. Kardec talks about it, but I lost here. I can't find it. If I find, I'll tell you. So again, our present existence dictates our future lives. The way we deal with our here, I found it. Frivolous spirits are further recognized by the willingness to foretell the future and to specify the dates of physical events that we should not know about. Good spirits may enable us to have a presentiment of future things when such knowledge is useful, but they are never precise as to dates. Any proclamation of an event to happen at a specific time is an indication of fraud. Item 267, paragraph 8 of the Medium's book. Okay, if anyone wants to make a note about future dates, specific dates. Okay. So here, when we talk about our forgetfulness of the past and what we face in this present existence, we conclude by saying that everything that we go through in this existence is an opportunity of growth, either by repairing errors from our past or trials that will allow us to grow, allow us to evolve morally and intellectually. Okay, so that's the end of this chapter. Any final questions, comments here? We have 5 minutes left. Elmo, anything else?
No, I think it's Kardec summarized everything so clearly. I think it's always good to remind ourselves, because we have definitions, words, you know, like atonement is a reference to errors of the past, and trials is a preparation for achieve something great in the future. And they are both good. Painful, but good.
I have a question here. If you decide to not participate in the planning of a future incarnation, will it happen according to a natural giving process? There is always a team of spirits that take care of our reincarnation, the reincarnation process. And the planning is decided much more by the spirits than by ourselves. If we are aware of the reincarnation, the process of reincarnation, and we want to participate, we can participate. But if we decide not to participate, it will happen anyways, and the spirits will take care of it. Again, our free will dictates where the choices we make, and we can make the choice of not getting involved. But my guess is that those that are aware and are interested in progressing and doing the best that we can will be very interested in participating in their reincarnation planning. That's my guess. Okay.
Yeah, I agree. I think if a spirit evolved enough to merit to take part on that planning, it would be eager to do so in general.
So you are always being guided by someone else. They were always being guided by more evolved spirits. Yes, we are never going to do it by ourselves at this stage of our evolution. We are not smart enough yet, wise enough yet to do our reincarnation plan by ourselves. We need help.
Yeah, one would expect that at one point you'd have to take greater responsibility of our own future, right?
Yeah.
The more you evolve, the more responsible you are.
That's right.
Of course. Yeah. But
Okay.
at this stage, yes, Paco.
Can I summarize this, that the ability to recall past lives is directly correlated to the degree of involvement by a particular spirit?
Yes.
Otherwise, if the spirit is unable to, it is usually recalled or remembered at the intuitive level in the form of conscience as a way to rectify past mistakes.
Yes. Perfect.
Okay.
Exactly that.
Thank you.
Okay. So I stop here. What we have for this weekend. On Saturday, the talk is Do Not Hide the Light Under a Bushel by Marcia Trajano. A discussion on how we are called upon becoming light and to live a life to inspire, influence, and exemplify love. Okay, Marcia lives in Tennessee. Just moved to Tennessee, and she's a very good speaker, and it's a very interesting subject. On Sunday, we have the third episode of Initiation into Spiritism at 10 a.m. by the United States Spiritist Federation through their YouTube channel, Facebook channel, and through the International Spiritist Council YouTube channel. And we studied, this is the first Sunday of the month, so we are going to study the book Liberation. We are on chapter 8, okay? And we are in the middle of chapter 8 as they are talking to Gregorio and discussing and asking. Eloy, Gubbio, and André Luiz are asking for Gregorio for an opportunity to assist Margarida. And if you are curious about it, just read the book before we meet, and we are going to discuss it. Chapter 8, finish it, and start chapter 9. Book club next week on Wednesdays at 7 p.m. Next week will be the last chapter of the book Renunciation. We're finishing another book, Danny. Thank you. And on February 16, we start studying, discussing the book 2,000 years ago, which is the reincarnation of Emmanuel as Publius Lentulus at the time he met Jesus. And he had the opportunity, Jesus gave him the opportunity of making a choice to follow him then and there, or to struggle.
My favorite.
And he decides to struggle. More details, just study with, go with Danny and study the book. It's a very, very good book to read.
That's going to be our third book already.
Third book, yes. We studied And Life Goes On, Renunciation, and now 2,000 years ago. Third book virtually. Before that, we did a couple of books when we had our center open. That we hope to have it open again soon. Okay. Okay. I think that's it. Carol, can you do our final prayer?
Sure. Thank you. Infinite Creator, Supreme Intelligence, all goodness and grace, we are grateful to be together this evening for our study of the Spirit's book, Chapter 7. We realize that the more we evolve, the more we can be aware or even remember our past. Sometimes it may be useful, sometimes it may not. On more evolved worlds or elevated worlds, remembrance can be easier because the physicality is less dense. We are moving into the world of regeneration, and the timing, of course, depends on the collective. So there are many, many other considerations. Atonements are challenges that can be related to our past, and the trials which we may be experiencing in this life allow us to grow morally and intellectually. The errant word means life of the spirit in the spiritual world, those that are in between incarnations. Our future is not written in stone. However, we are creating our future life in this very present moment. May we be kind to ourselves, and may we always try to do the best in our endeavorings. May this life bring us a greater awareness of the possibilities. We are grateful to our spiritual benefactors, the good spirits, the helpers, the healers, the teachers who are with us. They are guiding us and helping us to be in alignment with that greater vibration of peace, of charity, of goodwill, and of hope. May we receive the love, light, and peace of Christ within us as we go forward this week. And may we continue with our studies, with our prayers, and with our mindfulness, knowing that all the goodness that we are pursuing and that we share will be a great blessing to many who are in need, who may be suffering, who are in need of help and healing. May we do the best each and every day. And as we close now, we humbly ask for safety and protection as we go forth, family, friends, loved ones, and co-workers, for we are really never alone. We know that this love, this great light is always with us, and may we share it freely from our hearts. We close now, we ask to humbly close now our meeting and remind ourselves to go forward as beacons of light. Go forth now in peace and in gratitude, so be it.